don't think we should see each other anymore. You're great, but I'm riddled with personal problems.
What's wrong? What did I do?
No, nothing. It's not you. It's me. I have a fear of commitment. I don't know how to love.
You hate my earrings, don't you?
No.
And you didn't comment on the chopsticks.
I love the chopsticks. I personally prefer a fork, but they look very nice.
You're not telling me the truth. I must have done something.
But I don't want to be a
secondary character.
Hello, Stephen.
Hello, Ivan.
Hello, Stacie.
Boyos.
Yeah, boyos. Welcome to another episode of Bidwabask. This is a podcast where we talk about the secondary characters from the greatest sitcom of all time, if not the greatest show of all time, Seinfeld. And this week, Stephen, we are going to season 3 to talk about the second episode of that season, The Truth.
That's right. We'll be talking about papier mache and other pretentious things.
Chopsticks.
Chopsticks, yes.
Yes, whether we prefer forks instead. And if you're an ongoing listener of the show, you would have heard Stacey's voice before.
Hello, that's me.
Yeah, welcome back, Stace.
Thank you. Coming to you from my wardrobe.
Is that where you keep the chopsticks?
Yes. My collection of papier-mâché hats, my chopsticks, my dangly earrings, and it's also where I come to write my poetry.
Very nice. So away from the burnt out building at the docks, you go there instead.
Yeah, that's the office. This is the home office.
Nice.
If you want to send us pretentious poetry, you can email bidwabaskpodcast@gmail.com. We're on social media. You'll find all those details in our show notes, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Reddit. You can listen to all of our previous podcasts on whatever your podcast app is of choice. And if you want to rate us or review us, that would be amazing. And finally, you can support us financially too.
Yes, we are on PayPal and also on Patreon. And on Patreon, you do get early access to this episode, as well as access to our bonus podcasts, Curbcast, our Curb Your Enthusiasm review podcast, and our temporarily halted season 11, where we talk about, or we come up with modern episodes of Seinfeld set over 20 years after the events of the finale. So Stephen and I write the plot. We bring back some old secondary characters, bring in some new secondary characters, and have a bit of fun with those. And big thanks to our current patrons as of recording, Holly, Nakia, Neil, and Jeff. So thank you so much for your donations, and you get all those goodies. So if you want to join them, patreon.com/bidwabask.
That's right. And if you want to check out our Facebook group, Seinfeldisms, we are the biggest Facebook group for Seinfeld. We're at about 85,000 members now, which is amazing.
Woohoo!
Woohoo.
It just keeps growing. It's so wonderful.
I know. We're getting about 3,000 or 4,000 members a week, which is just absolutely
wow.
And
mind-blowing.
Yeah, we've got some really cool things in the works. They'll be revealed over the next couple of weeks. So, just type Seinfeldisms into Facebook to check it all out.
Yes, if you do follow Seinfeldisms and you listen to us, you're doubly awesome.
That's right.
And that's the truth.
and that's the truth. Ain't that the truth?
Ain't that the truth?
You are the truth?
Well, speaking of Seinfeldisms, you two, I guess we can talk about some Seinfeldisms in our lives. So, Stephen, first of all, what's happened to you in the world of Seinfeld in your life, buddy?
First time in quite a while, nothing Seinfeld related has happened in my real life. The last week or so has been especially Seinfeld free, which is sad, but it happens from time to time, especially during lockdown. What about you?
No, nothing really, unfortunately. Like you and Stacie with lockdown, not much has really happened. I mean, like we've gone for walks and to go to get coffee and stuff, and that's really all we've really done, haven't we? So no, I can't really make anything Seinfeld related. But Stacie, I guess you could probably bring this one home. Do you have any Seinfeldisms since you've been with us? You're trying to figure it out too.
I'm just racking my brain. I don't really think so, other than the fact that I've recently started making bagels.
Oh, okay. Great.
That's not really Seinfeld related at all, but we're drawing pretty long bows in the lockdown days.
So you've gone on strike after trying to cook them? You're like, after a week, you're like, I can't do this. I'm on strike.
Well, like my last time I had a Seinfeldism, I'd been at a bagel shop, which provided me my Seinfeldism because they had the Kramer poster. But then that bagel shop that I love happened to be outside my 5-kilometer radius, and that prompted me to start making my own bagels. So now I've cut out the middleman and I'm just making my own bagels, but I don't know that you could necessarily say that, well, I guess it's kind of Seinfeld related in a very loose sense.
Well,
Yeah,
bagels were prominent in the episode The Strike from season 9. Zach Graham used to work for H&H Bagels, so there you go.
Yes.
You're following in his
Well,
footsteps.
I am now a qualified bagel maker following in Kramer's distinguished footsteps.
No bagel, no bagel, no bagel, no bagel.
And
So yeah,
let's-
that's about as close as I got.
Considering we don't have any other Seinfeldisms for this week, that will do, I think.
Yay! We'll take it.
Yay.
We do have some Seinfeld news, though. Bit of slim pickings this week, like the last couple of weeks. But through the week, Jerry Seinfeld contributed, I guess, his cachet or his pull. As we reported a couple of weeks ago, there was a article that it was an op-ed, actually, in I think the New York Times, that Jerry Seinfeld put out, basically calling on the residents of New York to rebuild the decimated comedy scene and entertainment scene at large because of COVID-19. And that was in response to an article that came out, I think, earlier in the year, more or less mourning the loss of said entertainment and especially comedy scenes. And sort of in light of that, or as an extension of that, through the week, there was a little, I guess you call it like a little event at the Gotham Comedy Club in Chelsea in New York. And Senator Chuck Schumer, who's a well-known politician in New York, he's been a New York, I think a senator for New York for decades. And he basically used it as a promotional opportunity to push for a new act. And it's called the Save Our Stages Act. And if it's passed through US Congress, it would provide $10 billion to live entertainment venues across the country. Obviously, obviously, comedy venues, music venues, any sort of like entertainment venue, big or small, has been absolutely decimated in the last 6 months. And Chuck Schumer is like a working class sort of politician. I think he's a sort of like a working class Democrat. And, he's a champion of small business and medium business. And as part of that little event to promote the act and get some public support, Jerry Seinfeld came down and he gave a little speech. You can check it out on YouTube. And he more or less repeated the sentiments of his article that I mentioned before, calling on New Yorkers to really get behind comedy clubs when it's obviously safe to do so, and really championing the Save Our Stages Act that Chuck Schumer is really trying to push through Congress. No word on, whether it has support across the board, but hopefully it does, because those small businesses are the lifeblood of New York and pretty much every city, not just in America but all over the world. So a cool little thing that Jerry did, and hopefully it's successful.
Absolutely, because when we interviewed Kenny Kramer a few weeks ago, Steve, he did mention that a lot of businesses in New York were struggling, especially small businesses, restaurants and stuff. And I think you said like 30 to 40% of all restaurants in New York closed down. Yeah, and a lot of those won't come back. It'll be similar here with Melbourne. It was a struggle after the first lockdown, but after our second lockdown, which we're sort of just at the end of, at the end of the first phase of that lockdown, that was sort of the death blow, unfortunately, for a lot of restaurants. So
Death
blow.
blow.
I mean, there you go. Yeah.
We're yet to see the final death blow.
We do.
Final death blow. This is not the death blow that we want, though.
No.
Yeah, and I do remember Kenny also saying that, he had to put his bus tour, on hold, and he probably won't return to it because he doesn't see the business potentially being viable ever again, at least for years and years and years. And he is getting on a bit. So, lots of unfortunate casualties.
Yeah, definitely very sad. But anyway, hopefully hopefully it does pass. The money does come through.
I wonder if Jerry's fronting any of that, because $10 billion is a lot of money.
Probably not 10 billion. I don't think it's worth that much.
No, but where on earth are the American government going to get that from?
Who knows? That's a story for another time.
$27 trillion of debt, 10 billion is nothing, really.
Yeah, I guess.
You got to spend money to regenerate the economy to make money again. So it's sort of
that is very true.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they'll tax the rich. Maybe they'll tax Jerry to pay for the comedy.
Jerry should have kept his mouth shut. That's not what I meant.
I was just making a joke. Buried
I'm a comedian.
Like, I can imagine like an act that passes Congress, is like really long, like pages and pages and pages, and it's probably like really dry political legalese, buried in there. There's probably some obscure clause that actually says, to fund this, we will tax Jerry Seinfeld. And he's like, oh, what? I should have read it before I supported it.
Damn it.
Yeah, so that's all the Seinfeld news for the week.
Cool. Very short introduction to this episode, and it's going to be a very short episode, I think, guys. I think we're only talking about one or two secondary characters today. We have George's episode girlfriend, Patrice, who's quite colourful. We talked about off air before we started recording, and a bit about Tina, who we've spoken about in the past as well. This is her second of 3 appearances on the show.
That's right. Why don't we take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about those secondary characters.
Hi, this is Zach
and Aaron from Seinfeld Law.
and you are listening to But I Don't Want to Be a Secondary Character.
The Truth is from Season 3, Episode 2, and this one first aired in the US on September 25th, 1991, directed by David Steinberg and written by Elaine Pope. In this episode, Jerry is being audited by the IRS, but everything is in hand as George's new girlfriend Patrice, Valerie Mahaffey, is an accountant and former IRS auditor, and that she has agreed to help him out. Unfortunately, George isn't too happy with the relationship, and when she asks him to tell her the truth about how he feels, he obliges. You're pretentious.
It's the earrings, but it's so much more.
It's so much more.
You called my doorman Samuel, but you had to say Samuel, but you said Samuel.
Samuel. He just really goes off, doesn't he?
He really loses it in true Costanza fashion.
He does.
He explodes like Krakatoa.
Yeah.
He does. Much like the volcano fund. It explodes.
Much like the poor Krakatoan.
The poor Krakatoan. I'm thinking only for the poor Krakatoan. Their breakup leads Patrice to a residential depression clinic, and Jerry is desperate to get his tax receipts back. Elaine, meanwhile, is having to put up with Kramer, who is dating her roommate Tina, played by Siobhan Fallon Hogan. She's particularly upset by the fact that Kramer accidentally saw her naked. And besides Patrice and Tina, no other secondary characters. It's one of those other episodes, Stephen, where there's not too many secondary characters to talk about. We don't come across too many.
Yeah, I think the secondary characters in this episode, Patrice especially, was so strong that they kind of didn't need any. She carries normally the weight of secondary characters is carried by, 2 or 3 and maybe like a consistent, like a repeated secondary character. But Patrice was so good. It didn't feel like it was thin. It still felt substantial when it comes to secondary characters because she was so good.
She was a very, very well done 3-dimensional character.
Yeah, no, a lot to talk about. Before we do, let's talk a bit about the episode trivia. What do you have?
Well, I have Kramer raises money for the Krakatoa Relief Fund, and ironically enough, Valerie Mahaffey, who I mentioned plays Patrice, she was born in Sumatra in Indonesia.
Oh, wow.
Yes, ironically enough.
What a pretentious snippet of info for that actor.
Pretentious.
Well, like, it's not super common to have, someone, well, I mean, I was assuming that she's an American actor, but that could be incorrect.
Yes.
She is, right.
No, she's American, but she was born in Indonesia, yeah.
Yeah,
but,
that's a fairly, unique and an exotic history to have.
Yeah, I know. It's like me saying I was born in Madagascar or something. Quite exotic. Yeah, you don't get too many people born in exotic countries like that or exotic parts of the world.
Maybe when they wrote the script, it was a different country, but when they cast her and they found out about her Indonesian, that she was born in Indonesia, they changed it to Krakatoa.
Maybe. Well, I don't know exactly. Like, I don't know if that was because of that or it was just a coincidence. I didn't read up on that.
Probably just a coincidence. A couple of other bits of trivia. This is actually the first episode written by Elaine Pope, who would go on to write many more episodes after this one. So a strong start.
Oh, very strong start. Yeah, it's a pretty good one to get on the board.
Yeah, for sure. It's also the first episode of the show that wasn't directed by Tom Sharonis. So he did all of season 1 and 2. But as you mentioned before, this episode was directed by
David Steinberg.
Yeah, so that's his first episode. And then from here on in, it would swap between Tom Sharonis, David Steinberg, and a couple of other directors. So, yeah. And
then Andy Ackman would take it home from about season 6 onwards.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Do you have any other trivia?
Yeah, just a couple more. So George's breakup line, "It's not you, it's me," makes its first appearance in the episode.
Pretty well-known George Costanzaism.
It's not you, it's me. I invented "it's not you, it's me."
Exactly, yeah.
And Kramer's idea to turn the windshield he found into a coffee table anticipates his future idea of publishing a book about coffee tables in season 5.
I never put those pieces together before.
Yeah, so the deadly coffee table is a premonition as to what he will become.
It's funny that they don't actually reference the fact that he... because obviously, like, both he and Tina are injured in the... Oh, well, spoiler alert.
Yeah.
But, it's interesting that is never referenced around the time that he's writing the coffee table book, because I feel like that would be a funny little gag, to his claim to authority on coffee tables is that, he once made and then fell through his own coffee table.
Yeah, it's one of the rare times, like Seinfeld's really good at referencing old episodes when it's relevant and really good at continuity. Yeah, it's one of those rare times that they missed out on a really good, a deep reference that would have, sort of been a nod.
A callback.
To a previous episode that would have,
Yeah, like he could have showed Kathy, Lee and Regis his scar from having fallen through his invisible coffee table or something.
Yeah, maybe. Who knows?
That's true. Maybe it was too traumatic and he just wanted to leave it in the past with Tina.
With Tina, yeah, because I think he doesn't. I think Tina actually appears in the opposite, the season 5 finale. It's her final appearance, but Kramer and her obviously aren't seeing each other.
Yeah, obviously, she's probably a bit upset with Kramer after, even though it wasn't his fault, it was still
ending up in the ICU or whatever she did in hospital.
Probably put off by Kramer after crashing into his coffee table and ending up in the hospital. Fair enough.
Yeah, I'm sure she was way worse off than him.
Yeah, that's true. The final trivia point I have is that when you see Patrice leaving Monk's after George lays into her, you see her put a pepper grinder and a container from the table into her bag, suggesting a bit of a klepto. Maybe, maybe she bought her own bag and pepper grinder for some reason, and she's just putting them back in a bag. But an interesting little characteristic that they don't address in the episode. But
I didn't even pick up on that.
Yeah, I didn't.
Yeah, I didn't either.
I didn't notice it until I saw the trivia point, and then I rewatched it. And yeah, you just see it as she's as George is offering to walk her back to her office, and she's obviously a bit upset about George's outburst. She says, I prefer to go back to the office alone. You can see her just quickly put a pepper grinder in a little container as well, back in her bag. So,
well, maybe we can try and incorporate that into her character when we talk about her.
Yeah, that's true.
Come up with an idea, hypothetical.
True. Well, speaking of, that's a nice segue. Why don't we just launch into Patrice?
Sure. Played by American actress Valerie Mahaffey. She was born, like I mentioned before, in Sumatra in Indonesia. She's most famous for her Emmy-nominated role as the character Eve in the TV show Northern Exposure. She's also appeared in the films Seabiscuit and Sully. And I guess we can probably establish that she has a history of mental illness. She's probably had a couple of nervous breakdowns in her lifetime, and George tips her over the edge and she has another nervous breakdown.
I mean, I think anyone dating George would be, inclined to be tipped over the edge in one way, shape or form. As he does himself reference, he's like, I've turned someone to lesbianism before, but, never a mental institution.
And that's also a nice reference to Susan, because Susan ends up dating a woman after Susan breaks up with George. So there you go. It's the second time that he's converted someone to lesbianism.
Probably even more than 2, I would take it.
Yeah. Probably, half of New York maybe, who knows. But Patrice, I feel like she's really intelligent. I think she's really good at her job. She's like an accountant / auditor. I feel like she's really supportive of like the little guy. I feel like maybe when she worked at the IRS, she was really well qualified to be working for that department or that organization. But I feel like maybe the IRS, well, from my understanding, it's kind of like our ATO, Australian Tax Office, I suppose. They collect tax revenue. But I can't speak about the IRS because I'm not American and don't pay taxes in the US, but in the ATO, they kind of have a reputation for being a bit too heavy-handed when it comes to collecting tax, and there's always like a negative about the ATO. So whenever you have to deal with them, usually it's like you owe them money or you got to follow up on something, or you might be audited, much like Jerry is. And I feel like maybe Patrice had good intentions to be in the accounting field, and maybe the IRS, she probably felt it was too heavy-handed in their approaches, and she probably didn't like the idea of having to like audit other people or workers who may have done their tax return wrong or something. So she probably decided, I'm just going to help the guy try and get the best possible tax refunds they can get, and try and get them in the least amount of trouble as possible.
I would agree with that. I think beyond her sort of motivation or her ethics, I think she's just probably over the bureaucracy and just like the dry corporate culture of something like the IRS. She's obviously a very creative woman. She talks about how everyone in her family is very creative. She's very expressive in how she dresses and her accessories and all that. She's quite a quirky, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but an eccentric woman, at least in terms of her style and outward presentation. And I just don't think that personality would mesh very well with something as bureaucratic and dry as the IRS for very long. So I think it's a combination of being a bit disheartened over what she has to do for the IRS, and also just burnout or just getting sick of the repression of who she is in a job like that. She's leaning into the artistic side, and I think being an accountant, that kind of implies that she's sensible. So maybe, she does say that she's concentrating on her artistic creative side. So I think she's sensible and level-headed enough to not just quit the IRS one day and try and make a career out of being a creative person. I think she's slowly building up the creative income, and when it's replacing a current income, then she would quit. I think even though she's quite creative and expressive and quirky, I still think she's got that more sensible side where she wouldn't just throw it all away and take that risk.
Yeah, definitely. But like I said, I feel like that maybe she wants to help like the little guys. You know how sometimes you might get lawyers who might want to specifically work with like refugees, asylum seekers, people who are downtrodden. I think she probably has that mentality as well. She probably doesn't want to deal with, like you said, dry bureaucratic processes.
Yeah, what do you think, Stace? Sorry, we've been doing all the talking. What do you think?
No,
Stace
okay.
will come in with her massive curveball.
Yeah.
Well,
usually you have fantastic hypotheses.
So the first difference I think in the way that I went with the character Patrice is that I thought from the dialogue in the show that she had previously worked for the IRS, had left them and was now just practicing as an accountant. So potentially we're looking at sort of as the both of you have already posited, but so previously she worked with the IRS. That was probably a high level job, perhaps, as you said, having to audit people, feeling like she was having to maintain standards that she didn't agree with. And, maybe just, the pressure of that government and official kind of office was too much for her. And she maybe had her first, her first sort of experience with needing to have time off, having a bit of a breakdown, potentially having burnout, as we've already sort of discussed. And so from there, she went from, working for the IRS to just being a private accountant, because my sense in the episode is that she's not currently working with the IRS. She's moved. And obviously, like the attire that she's wearing on that lunch date with George, with the chopsticks and the beautiful, silk dress, probably not going back to the IRS. Dress like that, you never know, but that was my guess, especially in the 90s. So I was thinking that she'd sort of, had her earlier career as a high flying, probably quite high achieving, audit officer perhaps in the IRS, and is then sort of discovering this creative expression self, and sort of, as you were saying, Stephen, like slowly working her way towards what she wants as her artistic career, and just being able to exclusively, be a creative, but is sort of slowly transitioning out of the accounting field and more into the arts. And I think the points that you were making, Ivan, about her sort of having the backs of the little guys or wanting to, like stand up for what's right, I think, that seems, even in the fact that George says, you called my doorman Samuel instead of just Sammy. So she sort of seems to give people like a high degree of dignity and respect. It seems like she's probably a fairly warm, caring person. Even the way that when they first go to visit her in the like respite center or mental health center, initially she's quite suspicious of Jerry. She's like, who are you? Why are you here? And then once he sort of mentions the papers, she's like, oh, you're the Jerome with the tax problem.
She doesn't call him Jerry. She calls him
Jerome.
by his full legal name. Yeah, Jerome.
But she does very quickly sort of say, oh, I'd be happy to help if you can just get me copies. So even though, George is his friend and George is obviously a dickhead, she's still willing to help Jerry. And even when she's, in an inpatient facility, like she still seems more than happy to help others, even when she's got her own trials on her plate. So to me, she seems like a pretty, kind of warm but kooky, and like there's definitely elements of her being a bit of a pretentious, maybe has, what's the term, like being well-to-do or having airs and graces.
You're right. Yeah.
It does seem a bit like slightly pompous, but anyone who's has any whiff of formality or quirk would come across as pretentious to George, because he's quite lowbrow. He likes chocolate sundaes on his face and baseball. Like he's not a highbrow person. He has no interest in art, or like the only time art becomes useful to him is when he takes, we did last week, the bookstore, when he takes an art book into the toilet. So like that's the only time art has been appreciated by him, and it wasn't even
when
he's in the bathroom.
Lack of and there's also another episode where he says he offers to buy a painting from Jerry's girlfriend who's a painter, but then he
In the
doesn't-
note, yes.
Yeah, he doesn't
The
actually
episode
want
before
to...
this one, I think. No. Oh, no, not the note. Sorry, it was the letter. That's the one. Yeah.
He has no appreciation for art or creative pursuits.
No,
No,
he doesn't
that's
care. Like, even trying to read Breakfast at Tiffany's, he won't read a 90-page book. He'll watch the movie.
Yeah, look,
You know?
if I met Patrice in real life and, she spoke to me as she does to George and to everyone else, I would probably think, oh, well, you are a bit quirky and, you are a bit maybe more expressive or verbose than other people. But I wouldn't build up resentment to the point of exploding at her. I would just accept it and just think, well, you're a bit more quirky than other people, but I wouldn't be put off. I said that last week. I wouldn't be put off.
You did off-put, yes.
Yeah, I keep saying off-put. I wouldn't
You've
be
got
put
mental dyslexia.
I do. Yeah, so I think to anyone to George like her comes across as way more pretentious than she would to us or anyone else really. So
Yeah.
I think the
Definitely.
interesting thing to me is that, in one way she seems like a fairly kind of, put together, confident. She's obviously quite accomplished. She's got, this career behind her. She also has, creative interests and is pursuing her passions in art. And yet she still, as soon as George sort of says that they need to have a chat and that he wants to break up with her, she immediately jumps to like, oh, I did something wrong, like why won't you tell me? Oh, you hate my earrings. Oh, you didn't talk about the chopsticks, like blah blah blah. Like I was kind of surprised that someone who on paper seems to be quite a mature, high achieving adult sort of seemed so quick to need that validation from someone as unrefined as George Costanza.
Yeah.
I suppose that's
But
the
she's-
character.
Yeah, I think externally, yeah, she's quite accomplished and successful, but internally, I think there's quite a bit of fragility and insecurity there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's demonstrated by
Yeah.
the fact that as soon as George goes there and very obviously, and transparently apologizes just so that he gets back on her good side so that she can do so that she can do Jerry's taxes, she's immediately interested in George again. She's like, really, you want to get back with me? So I think maybe she's just used to men not treating her very well. So that's just the standard, even though she expects very high things for herself and she meets those standards in terms of the men that she dates. Any sort of validation, even after they've just dumped on her like George has and sent her to a depression clinic, Woodhaven, that's the name of it.
Yeah.
Woodhaven.
Yeah, I think she just has high expectations of herself, but low expectations of relationships.
Of others.
Probably just,
Of others,
probably just. I picked up that as well, Stace. That she has, she's very well put together externally, but internally,
Very
she just-
articulate, and she stands up for herself as well, and it
She does.
I find it kind of interesting that she ends up in the depression clinic because the way that the character is acted, she actually seems quite, and I guess that's just, the writing of the show, but, she packs her things up at the table. And even though, yeah, she does steal that stuff, which maybe, as you said, is like a bit of a nod to kleptomania and maybe some underlying mental health stuff going on, she actually remains fairly composed. She doesn't seem too
on screen, at
upset
least.
or emotional. It's not until, obviously later. So perhaps, as we've sort of already said amongst ourselves, like she's maybe got this, history of having had some really challenging times. And even though she's kind of got her shit together at the current moment when we meet her, it's quite easy for her to get set off course. And just this critique from George is enough that sort of pushes her over the edge, and then she slowly kind of devolves into needing to go to the clinic. But then even when she's in the clinic, she's still, able to kind of stand up for herself and is accusatory of George and Jerry, but then very quick to take George back, when he's kind of being nice for the sake of getting the papers and whatnot. So it's quite an interesting character and very, very well acted.
Yeah, very well done. Yeah. I feel like it's probably not her first trip to Woodhaven. I feel like she might have been admitted maybe once or twice before.
She looks very at ease there as well.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's like when you speak to people who've had mental health issues and they've gone to psych wards or anything like that, it's a bit hard for them to adjust in regular society, and sometimes they might slip back into those places. They might need that sort of, I guess the word is comfort of sorts to kind of get their routine back together. So they kind of need it and then come back into society. I feel like maybe with Patrice, she still has a lot of underlying issues that she's trying to resolve, and she kind of needs Woodhaven to kind of bring her back to the straight and narrow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think as well, like speaking about the fact that she's from a family of creatives, obviously not to say one way or the other, this is not in any way meant to be prescriptive, but there is a fairly like strong correlation between people using creative pursuits as an outlet for mental health. So I feel like she's probably, and especially if all of her family are creatives, it's probably a lot more normalized within her like setting to go and seek some help and have some like respite, you know, from the stresses of the outside world by going to Woodhaven and just kind of, you know, taking a break to reassess and settle herself before she goes back into the community. And that's kind of how it seems, you know, she doesn't seem at high levels of distress, but she also sort of seems like she just needs a bit of help to get back on top of things.
Maybe she's been through enough bad experiences with, you know, bad relationships or other, you know, other things happening in her life that she, you know, she's got enough self-awareness. She knows that, well, I need to go check in now before it gets to self-destruction or
Definitely.
you know, where I'm a bit more out of control. So
yeah.
And I mean, that kind of plays into her intelligence and her. One thing I wanted to raise with you both, why do you think she seems very, she always demands the truth. She doesn't want to be condescended to or lied to. You know, in both scenes with George, she demands the truth explicitly. Do you think that's because she has been lied to by previous relationships and she just doesn't, you know, she told herself maybe after her last relationship, I'm never going to be lied to again. I'm never going to be made a fool of again. I need the truth, even if it's harsh.
Yeah, I
probably
think that, I think that you could be definitely onto something there because there seems to be, like she'd rather take the harshness of truth than deal with someone giving her, you know, feeding her bullshit or being a bit sort of, I guess, manipulative in the way that they package the information. But it could also potentially be a bit of a way of, you know, it's to me, it speaks of someone maybe with like some, you know, anxiety kind of stuff going on where they sort of need to feel like they're in control of a situation in the same places that they're losing control. So obviously like George is wanting to break up with her, which then brings on her need to like demand truth and honesty, maybe as a way of sort of feeling like she's back in control of a situation. And I would imagine that that would be something, that's sort of come from either like family relationships or her own like intimate relationship history where she's just sort of, been, maybe she's like like, you know, young in the birth order where she might be like the baby of the family and has been sort of babied or cotton wooled in her life. Perhaps she's always been somewhat neurotic and has been kind of swaddled by her family in the past. And now she's sort of, you know, wanting to be this kind of more independent and have it together kind of self where she wants that information.
Yeah, it seems like intentional assertion, you know, like, this is what I want and I expect it because I don't want to be misled. And
come hell or high water, I want the truth.
Yeah,
and George isn't the kind of guy who'll just deliver the truth to you straight away. He'll always try and weasel his way out of it.
Yeah, she probably knows that George can be a bit slimy and a bit dishonest as well. So she probably knows that even though she doesn't know exactly what George thinks of her until he announces it, she knows, you know, I mean, it's not hard to perceive that George is being dishonest pretty much all the time. But I think she had a sense of that's who he was, you know, throughout their relationship up until the opening scene. That she knows that George is going to be a bit manipulative and a bit of a liar. So she goes to that extra effort to demand the truth just so that she doesn't get played by him.
I was just like rerunning that scene in my head while you were talking about it though, and just like how she quotes the poetry by Thomas Carlyle and then George is like, Tommy C.
Tommy C. It just shows how refined he really
so
is.
lowbrow.
Yeah, Tommy C.
Look, I don't consider myself either lowbrow or highbrow, you know, midbrow maybe. You know, I like what some people would call pretentious things, but I also like non-pretentious things. I have no idea.
You're well-rounded.
Yeah, I'm midbrow.
Well-rounded. Culturally, yes.
If someone quoted that to me to make a point, you know, and she was making a point that art is more valuable than money. That was the point. Because George was like, is there any money in it?
Yeah.
And, like, someone could make that point without quoting Thomas Carlyle and it would be perfectly, you know, appropriate. I would probably think, that's a bit unnecessarily pretentious there. But
it is definitely verbose.
she's
very verbose.
She's obviously educated. And look, if that was her, you know, if she was raised in a family of creatives who valued creativity and more intellectual pursuits growing up, that was probably just the standard of or their style of communication growing up. So for her, that's normal, but for someone like George and most other people, it would come across as a bit pretentious. Or
I actually think she'd be a really good matching with Kramer. I feel like they would complement each other quite well.
Once she's out of the ward, or even if she's still in the ward, Kramer would probably want to see her.
Oh, that wouldn't stop Kramer.
No, definitely not.
And she's beautiful as well.
Dancing.
Like, I'm surprised that she takes George back and that they're dating again, when he says that he's taking her to the poetry reading in the abandoned building. And he's obviously not excited or enthusiastic about it. He's
doing it for his mate.
Yeah, he's basically just taken her back for the time that she's helping Jerry with the tax stuff. And then he's obviously going to dump her again. But I'm surprised that she takes George back after, what he said and all of that sort of stuff. Unless she respects him for the fact that he was so brutally honest. And if that's like such a bottom line to her, honesty above all else, perhaps that's part of the appeal of George, is that he said all of those things.
Well, maybe while she was in the depression clinic, maybe she had like talks with like psychologists and stuff, and she explained the situation and counselors, and maybe they said, well, maybe because George told you the truth, maybe he's like valid, he's been vindicated of sorts, so maybe you should just forgive him. Maybe she learns forgiveness in the clinic.
Maybe.
I don't think that would last long, though.
No,
especially with
not
him,
around George.
Not around George, no.
She would see that it's just a big fraud. That he's feigning honesty.
A big IRS fraud.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and
fraud.
She's a auditor, so she would be able to detect fraud and dishonesty.
Yeah, she's probably used to like dodgy tax evaders, saying,
maybe that's another reason
I don't
why
know where that
she's
came from.
Sorry, I was just saying, like, maybe that's another reason why she's so, thing about getting the truth out of people is because, she's probably been lied to a lot, not just maybe in her relationship history, but probably through her work and, in her career and stuff. So maybe that's just something that's like a real point of discomfort for her.
Yeah. Her job was to uncover the truth, so it makes sense that in her personal life she expects the truth, regardless of how harsh it might be.
The truth
Nothing
is
but
out
the truth.
there.
It is. A lovely 90s reference there.
A very complicated woman, but I really liked Patrice, and I can't remember the actress's name. I'm sorry, but fantastic. I thought she was
Valerie Mahaffey.
Yeah, she was tremendous, and a wonderful secondary character, and not really.
She's way too good for George. Like beautiful. Well dressed, smart, articulate, great fashion sense. I love that dress that she's wearing in the diner, and the earrings. Actually, to be honest,
somewhere from East Asia. I couldn't quite pick it. I didn't know if it was Japanese or Chinese. I was Chinese, maybe. Yeah,
one of the Chinese dresses with the little round buttons on the neck. It's very traditional Chinese style, but just beautiful, great. Seemed like a good egg.
And a great character.
A quirky good egg is how we'll summarize Patrice. Do either of you have any other points about her?
No, I think you two have covered it pretty well, actually.
The only other note I guess I have related to the episode and the character is that I also noted down that it was a female writer for the show. I didn't realize it was her first episode.
Elaine Pope. Yep.
Yeah, but I wondered if the storyline of Patrice was in any way related to personal experiences that Elaine may have had herself, in terms of, bad breakups or people, being dishonest or perhaps, getting unwanted or unexpectedly harsh truth.
Well, I didn't do the research on the writing process, but I assume, many of the writers take their real life experiences and incorporate them into the plots. So, maybe that happened to Elaine. Maybe something like that.
Just an idea, just a thought.
In a lot of shows where the female character, whether they're a lead character or a secondary character, is more complicated. And I would argue that, Patrice is maybe, slightly more complicated than a lot of other episode girlfriends in the show, in other episodes. And I have noticed that when female characters are more complex, where they have contradictions, where there's an emotional complexity to them, and when there's enough, they have a lot of depth. A lot of the time, complex women are written by women, which makes sense. They're writing about their own experience, and they're probably making up for what they see as a lack of complexity in a lot of female characters written by men.
Yes.
So I wouldn't be surprised if Elaine Pope intentionally wrote Patrice to be a bit more complicated than the typical episode girlfriend.
Yeah, because she's nothing like someone that Jerry would date, for example.
No, No, she seems quite. You could probably draw a lot of similarities to other episode girlfriends across the 9 seasons if you really thought about it. But no one immediately jumps to mind. She's very unique.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
very unique. Yeah.
So that was my last
that's why we like it.
point. Just
No, I think that's
a hypothesis.
Hypothesis.
That's a good point.
Yes.
Speaking of secondary characters, why don't we talk a bit about Tina? Not much to talk about, really, and we have talked about her in previous episodes. But worthwhile mentioning at least what she does in the episode.
Yes, another articulate woman. Not. She's a bit more streetwise and down to earth, and a bit different to
even more
to the previous.
And
Even more kooky. Yes, definitely a Kramer girlfriend.
A very Kramer girlfriend.
Yes, she's played by Siobhan Fallon Hogan. She was credited as Siobhan Fallon in the episode at the time. She's appeared in the films Men in Black and Forrest Gump, as well as the film The Paper that Stephen and I reviewed way back when. I think last year, the year before, when we did movie reviews, Stephen, we reviewed The Paper, starring Michael Keaton and Marissa Tomei. So if you are on Patreon or you want to sign up, you can go and listen to that one.
Yeah, Michael Richards is in that one.
Yes, that's right. He was. Yes, and Jason Alexander had a. Oh no, sorry. No, I think it was Jason Alexander. He had like a cameo.
What's the one?
You were thinking Trial and Error with Michael and Jeff Daniels. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. No, Jason Alexander, I think, had a short scene in The Paper. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, he played like this crazy guy. Yeah, he has a gun. It's really weird. Yeah. But yes, and Siobhan was in that one as well. She's also an alumni for Saturday Night Live. She's been in the show in 1991 and 1992. And as I mentioned, this is her second of 3 appearances on the show. Her first being in season 2's The Deal, which Stacie actually was on with us.
Yeah.
When we talked about that one. And her third and final appearance is in the season 5 finale, The Opposite.
Nice. Yeah, look, there's not really much in this episode in terms of like fleshing out a character. I think in The Deal we established that she was a bit left of center. Obviously grinds Elaine's gears. And that's demonstrated
very much
in many ways in this episode. The only thing that really stood out to me is maybe something that is unique to this episode and something we haven't talked about before is when Elaine comes home and she notices that, and when Tina notices that Elaine is home, she gives her back her earrings. Like it's not even talked about. Elaine just holds out her hand and Tina pulls her clip-on earrings off and hands them back to her. So maybe she's one of those housemates, that eats Elaine's food and, wears their clothes without permission. I can imagine her being.
Yeah.
Which
and she just takes Elaine's stuff.
Yeah, which would add to Elaine's annoyance of her and desire to move out, which she expresses many, many times.
But then on the flip side of that, in the other episode, she gets home from working out or whatever and then goes to the fridge and is like, who ate my cake? Because Jerry eats a piece. Oh, but that was Jerry. That wasn't Elaine.
That's true.
Yeah.
People are hypocrites, Stace.
Oh, no, I'm well aware.
Yeah. I feel like with Tina, because Elaine seems to have the full-time job at Pendant Publishing, and she earns probably not enough to afford her own apartment in Manhattan, but enough to pay, I'd say 2/3 of the rent, maybe a bit more. I think Tina maybe she just kind of needed someone.
Yeah, she's like a bit of a subletter.
She's a bit of a subletter, yeah. So I think Elaine's probably the main leaseholder, the main tenant, and maybe Tina's just kind of renting the room, and she probably doesn't pay much. Elaine just has her just to pay enough to get her over.
Yeah, that's probably why. Maybe that's why she tolerates her. That she's kind of essential to paying the rent.
Yeah, because we see later in the series when she works for Peterman, Elaine, she can afford her own apartment. So she's obviously had a bigger raise. Peterman pays her well, and she doesn't need housemates anymore.
No, she's probably happy to pay more rent, even if her salary is the same. She's happy to cover Tina's portion of the rent just to not have any more Tinas in her flat.
Or Kramers seeing her naked.
Or Kramers.
Yeah, or Kramers.
Yes.
I do love
everything.
My favorite bit of this scene is it just reminded me of what everyone talks about how Michael Richards is such a good physical comedian, and he is. Kramer's physical comedy is next level. But every so often, JLD does some amazing physical comedy. It's not as over the top as Michael Richards, but when she is upset a bit over Kramer's
how can I go on?
Yeah, she's like, how can I go on? And just the way that she moves her body, and she's obviously demonstrating just how icky she feels.
Yeah.
Over the fact that
that's so great.
And she's like, hello.
Hello.
Super awkward and just very strange.
I reckon the director probably said to JLD, try and make that moment you're really disgusted by it, or
it's like she wants to crawl out of her own skin.
Yeah, she feels really just grossed out. like just like skeezed out, just like ugh.
It would be like, well, actually, I was going to say it would be like if you saw me naked, Stephen, but then I probably actually wouldn't care.
No,
and then Stephen would say, you got to see me naked, then he'll start stripping.
That
Like,
would be a
just to
different
fair.
story.
Yeah, that would
But
be,
when Mr. Johnson is concerned, Stephen,
that's a whole other story. Actually, Stace, I have seen you naked by accident when you lived at my house briefly when you moved to Melbourne. I think you were
there you go.
You were
Seinfeldism.
we were sunbaking in the backyard, and I think I came out into the kitchen, which looks directly into the backyard, and I was like, "Oh, Stacey's out. Oh, okay. I'm going to get my coffee and go into my room now."
Was I naked or just topless?
Look, I can't remember. I've kind of, no offense to you, I've kind of scrubbed it, but
No, that's fair. That's reasonable.
And then Stacey's going to say, how can I go on?
How could I go on? Yeah. No, you're right, mate. It's all good.
an unremembered Seinfeldism there. There you go.
Yeah, there you
There
go. We got one in the end.
We did.
Nice. All right. Well, that is it for the secondary characters this week. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll find out where the truth sits in order of episodes we've reviewed so far, and whether any of this week's secondary characters appear in our top 20.
I saw her naked.
He saw me naked. Kramer saw me naked.
Well, it was an accident.
Who walks into a woman's bedroom without knocking? I want to know.
I thought it was a closet. Completely naked? Completely naked.
Jerry, how can I go on?
Alrighty, so that was the truth. We've obviously talked about Patrice, the complex kooky wonder, and Tina, Elaine's also somewhat kooky housemate. So where do you guys rank the truth in your lists, your episode lists, character lists?
So out of 144 episodes we've done so far, 28 for me. I really enjoyed the truth. Really solid, and I think Patrice was a wonderful secondary character. I'm sure all three of us can agree on that one. Yeah, it was just really, really great writing. I love George's subplot. I love how Tina came back as well from the deal. It's been like a bit less than a season since she was in the show, and I thought it was really great. Really well done. The volcano fun, the Krakatoa fun, kind of made me laugh. I like Jerry's. Jerry, there was a few smirks in the scenes that he did, which always makes me laugh. So
I love it.
I really enjoyed it
when you see them
me
like
too.
amusing themselves. And also, I guess we hadn't talked about it. Even just that little like subplot of the fact that, Kramer came to ask Jerry about donating to the Krakatoa Fund, and Jerry only did it to impress Elaine. Right?
Yeah. I like that. I like it adds
It's a very
I like how it
fair
adds to
thing
their
to do.
backstory. To Elaine and Jerry. Yeah,
we
trying to impress
all do
them.
things slightly out of character to sell ourselves as maybe more generous or altruistic than we really are.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Just to get the others' clothes off, perhaps. For me, this episode ranks at number 21, just outside my top.
Nice.
I love this episode.
Yeah, I think it's great.
Season 2 and 3 are probably my favorite.
They are the best.
About that. Yeah, look, they're not quite reaching the golden age, but I just love the simplicity of them. They're very.
I really
Yeah.
like the early
even though this
seasons.
Me too. Yeah, I'm starting to really appreciate them since we've done the podcast. Yeah, I used to be like all about season 4, 5, and 6, but now I'm like really loving the season 2 and 3. Yeah,
Yeah, they've just got this sort of like subtle simplicity to them, and there's not a lot of moving parts, but it doesn't seem empty or thin. Yeah, there's something about them. I think it's just because they're a bit more down to earth as well, makes them fantastic. There's not as much like obvious comedy that can be relied upon to carry the episode. It requires a bit more like subtle stuff to like carry the episode, and I think it really shines in this episode.
Yeah, 100%. So in your Staciometer, where do you rank this episode?
That's a good question. So I guess I would say it's probably like mid to high range out of 144. Like, I don't know that it necessarily would get to top 20 or close to top 20 for me like it has for the two of you out of 144. But I would say it would comfortably come in at like a 50 just at face value with the potential for it to go higher. Like, I think there's a lot of good parts in the episode. I love the fact that, that Elaine and Kramer have that weird crossover where he's dating her housemate and he sees her naked. That's great. The fact that Jerry has gotten George to use his girlfriend to help him with his tax audit is great. The fact that George gives this information and then she loses the papers and he doesn't have copies. Like, it's all very typical Seinfeld, great writing, great acting. So yeah, I'd say comfortably maybe like a 30, 40.
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah.
Really good. Very high up, yeah.
I think we're all on the same page. Like you said, Ivan, we all agree that Patrice is a fantastic character. Is she fantastic enough to appear in your top 20?
Before we recorded, like when I was trying to figure this out, I was thinking maybe she might just miss out. But upon further reflection, I think she does make my 20, my friend. I'll probably put her at number 18.
Yeah, I'm the same. I really liked her, but the more we talked about her, and especially like Stacie's take, obviously different to ours, just fleshing her out and understanding her a bit more, I would agree. I haven't got a formal position for her, but yeah, probably 18 or 19 for sure.
For sure, definitely. Just sneaks in.
And Stace, would you, if you had a top 20 or some sort of ranking system, would you put Patrice high up there?
I don't think so. I don't know that I would. Even though I think the character is like complex and very well acted, I don't find her particularly likable. Yeah, like she doesn't have a huge amount that happens with her in terms of storyline, even in the episode. She's in 2 scenes and they're great scenes, but not a lot really happens with her in comparison to some of the others. So yeah, probably not in the top 20, but definitely a great character.
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right. That is another week of But I Don't Want to Be a Secondary Character. If you want to get in touch with us, you can email us at bidwillbarspodcast@gmail.com. You can check out all of our social media links. They're in the show notes. You can support us by rating or reviewing any of our episodes, which you can get in any podcast app you choose. And if you want to leave some kind words, that would be amazing. And if you feel so inclined, you can support us financially too.
Yes, on Patreon and PayPal. And Patreon, you'll get bonus content as well as this week's episode earlier than everyone else.
That's right. And finally, we do have our Facebook group, Seinfeldisms. It's the biggest Seinfeld group on Facebook by far. We've got awesome things coming up. Some of those involving Kenny Kramer, which we can't divulge at the moment, but all details will be revealed. So just type Seinfeldisms into Facebook and check it all out.
Indeed.
All right. I'm one of your hosts, Stephen.
I'm the other host, Ivan.
And I am the frequently recurring and sometimes in a closet guest host, Stacie.
Back by popular demand from some of our fans.
Thanks for joining, Stacie. It's always a pleasure. Well, even though we're coming up to the end of our podcast, or at least this version of this podcast,
I definitely want to come back again before you're done.
For sure.
Yeah, you got plenty of opportunities.
Yes.
For sure.
Something juicy.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we need a classic episode to sink our teeth.
Yeah.
Lots of secondaries.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Cool. All right, everyone. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you all next week for what are we doing next week?
Next week, we're doing The Gymnast from season 6.
Oh, yeah. I remember that one.
We're going to eat some eclairs out of the bin. Well, I don't know if they're vegan eclairs. I'll have to do the eating then if they're non-vegan.
What a terrible chore.
What a terrible job.
Even if they were vegan, I wouldn't eat them out of the bin. So
If it doesn't touch anything.
You eat
No.
and I'll just go get a non-bin vegan eclair.
Yeah, no, definitely. If I had a choice, I'll go buy an eclair.
I eat leftover cafe table food.
Oh, that's fine.
Like when I'm
That's
traveling,
fine.
not so much here in Australia, but when I'm overseas, like if I'm sitting at a table and people, because often I think as well, like when you travel, people are even more like, people pass with money more freely when you travel. So like you go out to eat, right, and people will order food and then just leave like part of it uneaten. I'll eat those chips if they're not like, not the ones that have been bitten and put back, but like free, untouched
Especially
virgin
these
chips.
days. Yeah,
I'm all about it.
fair enough.
Look, even if something's uneaten, I don't think you could call it virgin food if it's been in a bin.
No, I definitely draw the line at bin food.
Bin food, no. Even if it hasn't touched anything, anyway. But yes, we will talk about The Gymnast and its secondary characters next week, and you take care of yourselves and each other during this worldwide pandemic. I guess that is a pandemic, isn't it, worldwide? You take care of yourselves and each other. Mr. Worldwide, yes. And we'll see you next week, eh?
Catch you later.
Bye.